first step in putting the siding on a house is installing the trim. Trim refers to the wood, in this case, that is installed around the windows, at the corners, at the edges, anywhere the siding is interrupted or terminates. In our case, this trim is an engineered wood product made out of a kiln-dried cedar or cypress. It's finger-jointed, it's glued, it's clear, which means no knots. It's a very nice and expensive material. We'll talk about it a little more later, but it is worth the money to buy nice material for your siding, because nice material is going to last as long as the house lasts, and sometimes determines how long the house will last. This trim is put up with 18-gauge galvanized finish nails, 2.5 inches long. And even though this material will be caulked and painted, we're making the joints and the miters fit nicely. I mean, nicely. Not necessarily perfectly, but darn it, they've got to fit. We know, as we start out, that our windows are plumb and square, so we are safe in relying on the reveal with the window when we're installing the trim, without having to carry with us a level or anything like that. There's a lot of ways that window trim can be designed, a lot of different appearances and options, different widths and thicknesses, and most of these choices relate strictly to appearance. But don't forget that the purpose of all of this is to create an exterior siding system to keep the water out. We flash these windows behind the trim, but ideally, we don't even want the water to ever hit that butyl tape that's around these windows. We want the exterior flashing, the trim, the caulking, and the paint to keep all of the water out long before it gets to the window flange or tape that's just behind this material. The siding product we're installing is known as lap siding. This refers to the style of the siding and the installation, not the material itself. You can have lap siding that is made out of sawn lumber, engineered wood like OSB, vinyl, or what we are using in this case, a fiber cement board, more commonly known as hardy board or hardy panel. As the name implies, this siding is not made from wood at all, but from a fibrous cement. It's relatively easy to work with. It lasts a long time in our climate. It holds paint well. It is fire resistant. The bugs hate it, and it is not the most expensive. It's very popular and common around here, and probably in lots of places around the country. The siding is installed a lot like the roofing shingles were installed. The nails that are holding the individual piece are covered by the overlapping piece above it. That way the water goes straight down and never even gets close to a nail or a penetration. The siding is nailed at each stud with a 2 1/4 inch galvanized ring shank nail. They really hold. Once you get your first run or course in place and you know it's level, really level, you don't have to keep checking for level after that. You're just really making sure the overlap is consistent and that the reveal is consistent. These fellows have some really neat jigs, tools, that set the exposure exactly right as they work to take the guesswork out of it. Now, using scaffolding was pretty much our only choice for accessing this south wall. If you saw this in person, if you were standing here, you would probably be surprised at how abruptly the edge drops off and how it really feels like a bit of a cliff, especially when you're up on a scaffolding that moves and rattles around with every move you make. But I have got to hand it to these guys. They didn't skip a beat. They charged right up here to get this siding done. And take my word for it, it was scary up there. The camera does not do it justice. Now, all of that being said, we were extremely grateful to have the scaffold. We'll do a video here pretty soon talking about how I like to go about setting scaffold up and with a few pointers maybe on things to remember. Now, on some of the other parts of this house that are a little closer to the ground, we'll show a couple other access methods, other ways to work, as well as show the siding installation with a little better detail. If you pay attention, you'll notice that we are installing a small piece of Z-metal flashing on the top of our windows, and in all of the other places on the exterior of this house where the overlapping action of the lap siding is interrupted. This is so that any water running down the siding will run over the edge of this flashing and drop to the ground instead of sitting on top of the trim piece and soaking back under the siding and harming the house. This is important. If you skip this step, the caulking at the juncture between the trim and the siding might repel the water for a while, but that would be the first place that water would penetrate eventually. Never forget that water is the enemy, and flashing solves this problem permanently. It's easy to include right now and very, very expensive to repair later on.
Yep.
Anytime you think that water could be an issue, put some flashing on it. Now you can cut and make your own, or you can special order it. Either way, there's almost no downside. This rolled galvanized steel flashing is going in along the front of our house, right down along the grade, where there will eventually be a concrete porch. Now imagine if somebody is spraying off that porch with a hose, or maybe there are plants there that get watered regularly. We don't want water standing around, wicking back up into the siding or back into the subsheathing.
Oh, you lost your... I saw that. Oh, that was hilarious. Yeah.
All of the trim pieces we're putting up, or at least almost all of the trim pieces that we're putting up, including these around the garage door, are cedar or possibly a cypress. In fact, this is the same material that we used for the barge rafter that's hanging on the ends of our corbels. It's some of the nicest paint-grade exterior trim lumber you can buy. Every board is straight as an arrow. It has an attractive texture. It comes pre-primed, and it even smells good. Cedar is one of the longest-lasting, most stable woods out there. And since house exteriors are constantly getting wet and then dry, almost any cedar is a great choice, and cypress is often interchangeable. One nail is put in at every stud location. These nails are 2 1/4 inch long, ring shanked, and galvanized, with a slightly larger than normal head. You might have noticed these guys marking the locations of the studs with a Sharpie as they move along. Putting siding up is not like drywall or subsheeting. The siding is covering its own tracks as you go, so you can't just look at the nails below for reference. This siding is 8 1/4 inches wide, and we are leaving 7 inches exposed to the weather. So the nail just has to be less than 1 inch from the top of the board in order to be covered by the next course. Also, it is best and recommended to nail into a stud rather than rely on the subsheathing, although Hardy Company is comfortable with up to 33% of the nails being installed through the sheathing only. That's a relief to me, because occasionally you miss a stud. They do, however, insist that there be a nail into a stud within 12 inches of the end of the board.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now yes, there's a lot that I did not address here about cement board siding installation. Things like spacing, how much gap to leave, caulking, the tools, the hazards, how to store the material, not to mention the ladders and the staging and how to get up there and do the work. But all of it is coming in our next Spec House video. I also want to take a minute right here to thank Kenny Geyer, Jim Dory, and Nate Zimmerman for helping us out. Their contact information is included in the notes to this video. They are great guys. They're fun to work with. They're honest. They provide a wide range of construction services here in Southern Oregon, and they do nice work. How do you beat that? Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.